So welcome, welcome, welcome. Oh my gosh, I wasn't going to say welcome, 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 but they are coming in, my guides. As most of you know, I am a channeler and medium. And through Odyssey, our mission is really to put out information out into the world. So it helps those who are searching for the information. And no doubt, once you go and click on Odyssey, you'll find there's some resources on our website and also on our YouTube channel, of course, because you found us and here you are. So what is it today that we're going to be looking at? Well, something that keeps coming up, which is really important, that when you're working with energy and you're looking at making changes in your life, that it can affect your body. And some of you have reached out to me and you're saying that you're feeling a lot of energy shifts at the moment. What's going on the planet? Some of you feeling that quite lethargic, quite tired. And some of your, thank you, they just said nervous systems, these are my guides. Some of your nervous systems are feeling a little bit shaky right now, a little bit rattled, a little bit sensitive. So what better person that we could bring on board? We have our own, and I'm going to make sure I say this correctly, is naturopathic vegan chef. Is that correct, how I said
That's
it?
right. Perfect, Anne.
Thank God. Phew. Give me guides in other, galactic councils and other dimensions. It's fine, but saying the simple English word or written word, it's like
Well,
my brain goes all over.
that's quite a long, tricky word, to be fair.
Thank you. She's just too kind. So Ursula Lake, welcome. Ursula is coming on board with Odyssey, the platform. I've worked with Ursula a few times where Ursula's joined us on many of the retreats that we've had in the UK. And Ursula's well, she'll tell you more about this, but a part of Ursula's skills is all about the food side of things, the body, the mind, the energy system. And that's why we've brought Ursula on board to have a little look at how it affects us, what we are eating, and the relationship that we have with food. I hate using the word diet, but in our diets. And we're going to learn more. So let's have a little look. So Ursula, this amazing title that you have, can you give us a little bit more information? What does it actually mean?
Sure. So, I'm a naturopathic chef. I trained at the London College of Naturopathic Medicine. And basically, naturopathic just essentially means that we believe very fervently that food is medicine and medicine is food. And really, it kind of starts and ends there, really, because if you start with that concept in your head, then it's going to alter all the choices that you make. And you're going to start looking more deeply into exactly what you're eating, why you're eating it, maybe the reasons behind it, and start to make the little changes that will improve your life, your well-being, your stress levels, your emotional well-being. It kind of, it's impossible for us to think about us not being affected by our food. I think once you really get into it, because we are, it's a hackneyed expression that we've heard a million times, but we are exactly what we eat. We are created from the things that we eat. Our cells, I'm not the same person in any way, shape, or form than I was 20 years ago. All of my cells are renewed. So, and that has been fed by what I eat. So it is of kind of crucial importance. And probably as we get older and wiser, certainly it's something that I've come into really understanding. It's something I was always interested in. And I think that I worked in the fashion industry for a long time, working on fashion shoots. And I always noticed the way that how people responded to food and what they'd been given to eat, and how, a kind of a not particularly healthy lunch or breakfast would really affect people's energy levels throughout the day. And you'd see that if people had, were eating a bit more cleverly and a little bit more mindfully, then the energy levels of the group of people would be much higher, and we'd be much more productive as a team of people. And I started to sometimes have photographic shoots at my home, and then I'd cook for everybody, and everyone really loved it. And we always found that we were really productive on those days, and it sort of spiraled a bit from there. So that's kind of where it started.
I love that because you've answered a few of the questions I'm going to ask you because what people don't think about, what maybe doesn't come to mind is that actually, and what we're looking at this through Odyssey is that the people that we are around, our environment affects us, the individual people affects us. That it sort of changes the whole quality of your life, and food is one of the biggest things. And you know, some of the work that I'm doing with some of my students, with the learning to sort of, they said like biohack into their energy. We're going to look at that in a moment. I don't know why they keep bringing it up, my guides. But when you're working with your energy and you're sort of opening up and you're opening up to source more, or even if you're not and you just want to look at just how you're driving your own energy source within you, that's it. It's really important about how you have those individuals. And I know that when we've worked together on the retreat and some of my clients who may have never ever experienced vegan food and everything, I was like worried in a sense, like, oh gosh, what's going to happen? They're coming on this retreat, they're learning about energy, they're making these big changes, they're doing meditation, some doing it for the first time, and I'm channeling information. And then I'm then going to say to them, okay, they've got this vegan diet now. And some of them, being honest, were a little bit reluctant and a little bit worried. And I remember at the beginning, we had all this list of what people said they wouldn't eat. And then when you came along, it was like the magic chef in the kitchen. And the food, the thing is with you, which is different, which I've found with others, because there's been quite a lot of other chefs over the years that we've had that's work on the retreats. You're passionate. You're passionate about what you do and you embody it wholly. It's really this embodiment with you about your beliefs around the food that we are eating. But it's also that which they just said, the fuel that people are consuming. You said something about the cells and regeneration and how we are not the same as we were even last year, because we know the cells keep changing in our system and our organs and everything else. So what we eat is so important, the nourishment. And that, as you said, thank you, they said go back. When you said you with the groups of individuals on sets and stuff and fashion shoots, that you are correct. They sort of said that how individuals are, you don't even say you're correct, but that's what they just said, how people are feeling individually in themselves, especially because their fuel that they're consuming helps how their day goes by and how they communicate with each other. And as we know, on the planet right now, there's this massive shift of energy. Different people are waking up, they're having we call it maybe spiritual awakening. I sort of call it soul activation. If we want to call it that, people have had trauma or drama happening in their life and they're having massive breakthroughs, and there's a lot of stress and emotions right now and hormones in some people. There's a situation, and we was having a little conversation before we filmed about those situations where our hormones, our stress levels can be sort of managed by the food that we eat. Is that correct?
100%, 100%. I think there is so many different things that we can do to just feel better. And that's what I really like to try and put across in my food, is that food doesn't need to be restrictive, even though I do support, well, I am vegan myself. I used to be a vegetarian. I last ate meat when I was 16, so just a couple of years ago. And I thrive on it. And that doesn't mean to say that I believe that everyone should be doing that, but I think that it's a mindful step we can take. And it's quite a relatively easy step to take. And so I try and educate people so that they're to removing the fear from maybe making a bigger step towards going a bit more plant-based, maybe not 7 days a week, 24/7, but maybe just having a couple of days where you're just adding more and more fruit and vegetables and nuts and all this kind of the good stuff, which is going to really fuel your digestion. And, but essentially, because it's not just about how you look, it's really not that simple. It's so much more about how you feel, how even the responses that you'll make in conversations with other people. If you're feeling better and if you're feeling nourished and your parasympathetic system is turned on and you're feeling calmer and happier, you're going to interact with people better. And it all kind of for me, it's impossible to look at any aspect of my lifestyle and the people that I love around me without thinking that it could be improved even a little bit here and there by just looking at your diet. And by
Yeah,
diet, I don't mean it in a restrictive way. I just mean in what you eat.
And I'm so pleased that you said that last bit, because when I was saying to you off camera as well, when I was younger, I had bulimia and everything, and diet, just that is a trigger word for me. And I know some people out there, it could be a trigger word for them. That's why I hate you saying it. But yes, it's so important about our lifestyle, how we eat, and more plant-based and stuff as well. And the balance of that, which I love, because I know, like, if I've been working, if in some foods that I eat when I'm, channeling, when I'm seeing clients during the week and during the day, that depend, I've got to look at my fuel, what I'm eating. I went through a period of time when I just moved into this property that I'm here. This is about 2 years ago, and I was not equipped at all, and it was everything that was sugar, and I was going for chocolate, and I was going for everything else, and my energy just did not last the whole day. Now it's very different. I have the nuts and I have the dry fruit and everything else I have, so that I can snack and power snack during the day, my energy levels and stuff like that. So I like that. Okay, they just turned around and said they love the way that food has a conversation with the body. And this is the importance of this, is the conversation. And conversation is two ways, they said. So that's what's really important. Now, they keep talking to me about the energy of the food, but also, okay, thank you, the idea of Odyssey is literally to give tools to people so that they can help themselves. It's not for us to do the work for them, but it is to provide those tools. And I know that, you're coming on board with Odyssey, that you're going to see clients one-to-one, and there'll be more conversations about what we're eating and different types of food, and how food can help to heal us, because that's really important. That is medicine to our body. And I know with those one-to-ones that you'll be doing, that you'll be able to take, individuals through what they're eating, and move them through the whole of what would best suit their bodies. Okay, they just said this as well. They're also talking about okay, thank you. I don't know why, but they're showing me about, obviously, stress levels, and they're talking about food. I'm not sure if, I'm just listening to them, because they're showing me like an image of hugging the waistline and hugging the body. So I don't know if they're talking about comfort foods, or they're talking about certain foods would help. Yeah, that's what they're talking about. They're talking about, is there such thing? Is there a type of food that's really good for stress? I don't know. They're sort of bringing something up. I don't know if that's generally what we're changing or what we're eating. Does this make any sense?
Well, I think what I like to do is to reframe the whole concept of good foods, bad foods, kind of, food to me should be very pleasurable. It should be a social thing. What I love about doing at retreats is I'm cooking for a huge bunch of people, and you're all sitting around the table and you're chit-chattering, and it's a really fun, pleasurable experience. And actually, when you're doing that in company, you tend to slow down and you savor things a bit more. And you actually find you probably eat a bit less because you're savoring it and you're chatting to people. And so I'm all about making it very sociable, very pleasurable, quite indulgent. There's nothing that should be off limit, but there are little tweaks and things that we can adjust that will just improve stuff. So I would never say to anybody, you can't have this, because there's no point restricting people. But there are options you can give to people. You can kind of, try slowly but surely, maybe get people onto a slightly better path, so that all food becomes comfort food, and honestly, that healthier foods potentially become comfort food. To me, comfort food to me is probably like an avocado. I love avocados. I think the world without an avocado would be a terrible thing. Also, I love tomatoes. Like, I just don't want to live in a world without tomatoes. Really good ones that taste of something. With basil, and and so for me, it's all about educating people so that they can find the comfort in food without necessarily it being a McDonald's or something that is going to be very ultra processed, food. We have to accept the fact that in the 60s and 70s and the 50s before that, there was this movement of industrialization of food, which was meant to be a great idea. It was meant to free our mothers from the kitchen so that they could be doing other things. But unfortunately, it became big business. And with big business becomes the big lobbying companies that lobby our government. And the idea of kind of natural good food slightly goes out the window, because the person who farms pears hasn't got the money to lobby the government. And that's the unfortunate truth. So it's about kind of trying to get people back into understanding that, you maybe if chocolate's your thing, fine, great. But what's the best chocolate you could eat? Maybe you could go for something that's got a slightly higher cocoa percentage, which is much higher in antioxidants, which will kind of keep you looking younger and keep you feeling better and not give you the massive, high and crash. So it's just about making those changes so that, as I say, everything becomes comfort food. And I think that's something that can be achieved. And it doesn't, and as I say, I am a vegan, but it doesn't mean that I'm trying to make everyone become a vegan in any way, shape, or form. But I would love it. And I think what I've found from your retreats is that it's been great when people have bought my book or they've asked me for recipes that I've made because they've been really surprised by how delicious something was, or, I've made a really delicious pudding that everyone's gone, oh wow, I didn't expect a vegan pudding to be this delicious. Like, I've made this cheesecake at the moment. It's insanely good. Honestly, it tastes like it's like a proper baked cheesecake. It's brilliant, but it's made out of chickpeas and tofu. And the naughtiest thing in it is dates. So it's like a beautiful kind of really indulgent tasting, but super healthy and protein packed thing. So you can't even eat that much of it because it's really protein heavy. But it's really indulgent. So it's finding those sort of things where I think we're sated and we feel great. And we know that we're doing good for ourselves as well. Because I think that most people know, I mean, even my boyfriend's 10-year-old son downstairs, he knows that McDonald's isn't really doing him any good. He likes it and it's what his friends eat, but he knows it isn't really the best for him. And so I think it's about educating people to make some slightly different choices.
And I love that, and that's exactly what you're doing. And I absolutely, that's the magic of this. And it's, so for me, it's like, before it was like sugar, sugar, sugar. And now just switching over, I'll have that dark chocolate 85% or 90% if I could stretch that. And then I have those blueberries on the side and then those almonds. And it's like they'll snack, that those are brilliant. And it's almost like not that it's a guilty pleasure, but it's like I feel better in myself that I've reached for that than, a different type of chocolate, which would be high in sugar and stuff like that. My taste buds have really changed, which is brilliant. And I love the fact that you are the wizard in the kitchen, because I remember from the retreats when you made something out of chickpea, and I think it was like a chocolate or a mousse or something that you made, and it was like everyone was like, how did she make this? Add chickpea froth or something you did? And I was like,
Aquafaba, yeah.
yeah, I was like, what the hell was that? And I know that, we had a lot of people on the retreat that were sort of saying about, the food and the thing. And you've created this book and people can download it off of Odyssey, the platform. And, hopefully at some point that we get you on, let's do like a little cookery thing that people can see that, because I'm one of those that's, with a book, it's brilliant. I love looking for it and highlighting stuff like that, but I absolutely love when someone's cooking, and I've watched you cook in the kitchen before. It is like, the passion oozes from you when you're preparing food. And I remember from the retreats that you get so excited about when you've prepared something that you would come out and you sort of say, try this. And everyone would like come in and hover around the kitchen and watch you preparing things. So, and that's what everybody is like, they can feel that passion from you. So thank you. My guys are saying, okay, so we've mentioned, they got like a little clipboard here, and they said, you've mentioned about stress and comfort foods, tick. I mean, they've gone off now into one. But there was also sort of saying about okay, thank you. They're saying about also like there's some hormonal changes going on. I don't know exactly where they're coming from or what they're going on, but there's also, because the shift of energy that's happening on the planet right now, it's almost like the tsunami effect of people are changing. They're sort of, waking up to the fact they want to feel healthier and better for them. They want to take more control or manage or in charge of their health in a different way now. Maybe around the world, there might be some services that now aren't there for them, or the structure of their health system is changing, and they know they've got to bring it back to themselves so they can start managing what's going on in their whole life. And this seems to be really important. This is what they're also talking about. So, if I hate just chucking you things and going, hormones, but they're sort of saying about hormones. So is there anything like with the food as well, like with how that can affect our hormones? They're just bringing that to you?
I mean, 100%. I mean, what we have to accept, well, there are hormones within us that I can talk about, and there's also the hormones that we're getting from the external sources. So there's the pesticides, and unfortunately, both in America and the UK, we're both prone to some pesticides. Unfortunately, from what I understand, America's a little bit worse. So and that's a problem because it's getting into all the food we're eating. I hear horror stories about children in South America where there's a lot of cattle farming going on, and so that basically all the hormones that are being given to the cattle end up going through the cows into the water system, and the end result is that children aged 8 or 9 are becoming sexually, active. Essentially, the girls are getting their periods aged 9 or whatever. And this is really wrong. And this is because McDonald's wants us to have a lot of beef available.
And other fast too,
And
yeah, I'm like, I don't want to be sued here.
no, other people as well. It's not just, sorry, I keep on slagging off McDonald's, but it's all that big industry. Basically, any ultra processed food relies on all of those
Yeah.
huge sources of all of these things, be it beef, be it chicken, be it eggs, be it, dairy. It's all huge, huge, huge industry.
And
So we're unfortunately getting bombarded with hormones from there, which will then play havoc in our system. And that's why you really need to eat a lot of foods that are very rich in polyphenols. And this is all the kind of colorful fruit and vegetables, because one of the things that they do is that they act as antioxidants. So they help to reduce the ability of the free radicals that are in all those foods to kind of attack us and attack our cells. And they also, because they start they give you age, you are aging quicker because of the free radicals. So you'll hear that in skin cream. They often talk about that in facial stuff, about free radicals, and it also is in your body. So if you think about that as well, and the prevalence of cancer and coronary heart disease and stuff like that, it's all a big part of it. So that's another good reason for why we have to be mindful about the sources that we're getting our food from. And if we can afford it, buying organic, and if we can't afford it, maybe choosing to maybe treat ourselves with the things that we can afford that are organic, and maybe not everything, so anything that you're going to remove the skin of, don't have to worry about so much. So like a banana, it's got a really thick skin on it, so that's not such a concern. An avocado, again, it's got a thick skin on it, but anything soft like a berry, or anything where you eat the skin, like an apple, you might want to be thinking about exactly where you're getting that from,
wow,
because of those hormones.
I absolutely love that. That's a good tip because I always worry about, wanting to do as much as I can organic and free range and everything else that I'm eating. Because years ago, I mean, believe it or not, I started off when I was training as a zookeeper. Before that, I worked in the farm industry for a very
I love
short.
that you're a zookeeper. It's so brilliant.
Oh yeah. But I worked on a farm for a bit and we the even then when I was 18, 19, I was looking at the diet of the animals, what we're actually feeding the animals. And when you read the packets, it was quite alarming, all the E's and everything else, and all the chemicals. And when we broke it down, it was all to do with the hormones. And I was like, we're putting this into the food chain. Now, I'm 56 now, and if I think, God, that's a long time ago. So you're talking over 30 something years ago. Back then, there's, we were looking at it, and only slowly, people are talking about it now. But so more and more, if I'm going to, I admit I eat meat once a week because of some of the work that I do, and it was quite alarming when I was a vegetarian for a while, and I've eaten meat for years, and then now as a channel and everything, and I am sounds so bad. I'm an animal communicating whisperer, and I hear things from animals. But when I started channeling, Galactic Council, the energy that I was using up, I was told you just go and eat some red meat now. You need it for your system because of what was going on for me, and I was like, oh my God, but I don't want to sacrifice an animal for my own needs. That's selfish. And like, no, as long as they're organic and free range and they're being taken care of. And it was like, okay. And because I shifted a few things in my diet, some people will turn around and sort of say, well, it's more expensive. But because I am eating less, less processed foods and it's more natural food, actually it's not costing as much. And I can go more to some of that organic stuff. And like, that is a fantastic tip, what you said. I didn't realize. So I actually don't have to go buy that organic avocado necessarily, or
No,
maybe,
I
or
mean, obviously the organic is the gold standard. If you can afford it, amazing, great. Also, what it also does is that it increases demand, and the more demand we have for it, the cheaper it becomes. So it becomes more, equal for everybody. So that's one thing. But equally, I just think your aim is to eat as close to nature as possible, really. And so, as you say, if you're eating something that, it's grass-fed cattle or whatever, fine. There are better choices, essentially.
do you know what was really funny? I'm sorry, something slightly a little bit different. I remember went to Jersey and we were driving around Jersey and there's these cows that slowly sort of walked across, meandered across the other side of the road. And I could hear this because obviously being animal communicate. And one of the cows turned around and said, "Move out of the way," because our car was in the way. And that was before I started eating meat again. And I was communicating and I heard how happy those cows were. And I was like, wow, because of they were treated in a totally different way from, how we do it in the UK. I don't know about anywhere else in the world. I know there's certain parts where it's treated very differently, but I could hear how happy they were. And I stood by the side of the road and I was communicating with them and I was tuning in. I was like, well, how do you do your day? And they're sort of showing that he moves us out onto the pasture. They were talking to me and they were showing me, and I was like, this absolute brilliant. So I went in and he had a farm shop. So I bought the butter and I bought this and I bought that. And maybe, it's placebo, I don't know. But I was like, well, I'm eating something from a healthy, happy cow. And it made me feel so happy. I was like, this is brilliant. So yeah, gone off track again, but they said never
No,
mind.
no, but totally. You know how people sort of say, "Oh God, when if you cook something and you're in a bad mood, then you're kind of like putting all that anger into the food or whatever." It's. I think it totally exists, and it's really unfortunate that the big industries have kind of created this demand for all these hormones and chemicals to be put into, into everything really. And so it makes it more challenging for us, but we shouldn't kind of lose heart because there are other alternatives. When you're talking about cost effectiveness, the one thing I always encourage people to do is to use canned foods. That's totally fine if it's in water. That can often be a really good affordable way. Frozen foods are great. They're generally harvested just when they are at their ripest, and they haven't, we don't know sometimes, you might have bought a cauliflower. I don't know how long it's taken for that cauliflower to get from the farm to me. So that frozen cauliflower might actually have a lot more nutrients in it. So don't be afraid of those things. If you've got the freezer space for them, great, go for it. And also they can be really effective and quick. So like the other day, my boyfriend's mother came to London for a few days and she just arrived and she was starving, and I made her some pea and mint soup in literally 6 minutes or something, and I wouldn't have been able to do that if I hadn't had a frozen bag of peas. So there's lots of ways to kind of be thrifty and speedy. I think another misconception that people have about vegan or vegetarian food is that it takes a lot of time. I've never found that to be the case. People are saying, "Oh, isn't it a lot of soaking?" And I'm just like, not really. And also, even if it was a lot of soaking, that's like putting some nuts in a bowl, putting water in it, and then leaving it. It maybe takes 5 seconds. So it's not really that time consuming, I would say. But the other thing I was going to say about the hormone thing is obviously there's the hormones inside us. And I think we're all women in this group. And obviously in different stages of our life, our hormones are doing vastly different things. One thing I'd love there to be more education about at school is for men and women is hormones, because I think it would make life so much easier if we had an understanding of what was going on at our hormones at any given stage in our life. But, obviously, there are different needs. When you're younger, you might have totally different needs to settle down your hormones, you know, and when you're going into menopause, it's another set of needs, and you might need to be supporting your immune system and your digestive system by eating, you know, things differently, and also to encourage the happy hormones. So, you know, you want to be getting the, you know, the dopamine and the serotonin and the oxytocin. Those are the ones you want. You want to be kind of getting those going, and those can be. I think they're more readily achieved also when, again, going back to this idea that we kind of know when we're eating something that's a bit better for us and a bit more, you know, I know that it can be extremely comforting to eat a lovely bit of kind of milky chocolate, whatever, but for me personally, I get a little bit of a kick of kind of like going, okay, well, I've still eaten the chocolate, which is what I wanted to eat, or I've still eaten the ice cream, which is what I wanted to eat, but I've just made a better choice, and that happened to be because the ice cream was made out of cashew nuts and macadamia nuts rather than dairy, and it wasn't a super processed one. It was one that I made myself, or I froze a banana because a frozen banana is really ice creamy, like when you do that. So and I think those for me are the things that once you get into it, those are the things that are going to up your happy hormones.
I love that. There was something that you were saying a little bit earlier. It's you know how the idea was this fast food for us in our diet and processed foods, so that we then can get on and work and we can do that sort of industrial sort of side of us. But as we know, the last couple of years around the whole globe, there's been a massive change how people are restructuring their careers or their jobs or how they're working now. More people are working from home, so it's like instead of spending more time at the computer, maybe it means that you get up and you spend that little bit looking at what you're putting into your food, what you're eating during the day. So where somebody would have commuted, say, an hour before in the morning, what I'm finding through clients, as working as a therapist, instead of thinking they spend that hour commuting, they're now going to their desk that hour earlier and spending longer and stretching their day working. Whereas actually you still have that time. And if you're working from home, you can, can structure and do something like with the, looking at your food and what's happening and healthy eating and whatever. But they just said something. They just want to know sort of if there are some tips like biohacking with your food and stuff. They said, is there something that, while we're here right now, before we go into questions, is there something like biohacking looking at our food? I know we said something about greens earlier. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. So there is a fantastic book that I would recommend a lot of people to read. It's called The Glucose Revolution, and it's by a girl called Jessie Inshap. And it's on, I think I listened to it on audiobooks as well, so it's available there as well. And she talks a lot about basically flattening your glucose curve, which sounds very technical, but essentially when you consume food, you will, depending on how much carbohydrate is in it, that food will get converted into glucose, and glucose essentially is sugar. So anything that's quite carbohydrate heavy, bread, potatoes, pasta, all those sort of things, they are more readily becoming sugar. But also a lot of vegetables are carbohydrate as well. And it tends to be the more kind of processed those carbohydrates are, the sharper they will make your blood glucose response. So if you've got any understanding of diabetes or why people need to use that, it's because they're having a really insanely high glucose response to the food that they're eating, and they need to sort of flatten it out, and that's why they have the insulin to do that. So in this book, she has biohacked a few things, and she's worked with another company called the Zoe group,
Yeah,
who are kind of quite prevalent at the moment. And these were some things that they came up with that certainly seem to work in flattening your glucose curves. Because what you want to do is you want to have long and prolonged sustained energy throughout your day. You don't want to be going peak crash, peak crash, peak crash, because then you feel rubbish, and also you tend to make worse food decisions. You reach for the chocolate bar, you reach for the cup of coffee. It's just not a controlled response. Essentially, you just want to be nice and level. And they have found one of the things that she has suggested is by eating a big bowl of salad, and it could be dressed, so you could have some lovely olive oil in it and maybe some balsamic vinegar, and a big bowl of salad before you eat something else, which is actually, when you think about it, what people in the Mediterranean have sort of always done. And often when we look back to what our ancestors do, they make a lot of sense. And if you were in the Far East, they probably would have started with a bowl of edamames or something similar, or maybe some kimchi, or if you were in Germany, you might have had some sauerkraut, or if you were in Italy, you might have had some antipasti. It goes on and on and on. But basically, that forms a kind of it stops basically the carbohydrates hitting your system very, hard, and it levels everything out. And it's one way to sort of flatten that glucose curve. Another way is to have some apple cider vinegar in a glass of water before you eat. So just like maybe a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar in a tall glass of water. And I say apple cider vinegar, it could be any vinegar, but apple cider vinegar is the most palatable. It actually tastes quite nice. And once you get into it, you're like, oh, this is quite an exciting little drink. And if you have that either maybe a little bit before you eat or as you're eating, that again will really help to flatten the curve. So, and another one, this is the last one that I'll give you, is that it's just to do a bit of exercise after you've eaten. And that could be as simple as just being a little bit more energetic, maybe when you're stashing the dishwasher, or making sure that you maybe climb up some stairs, or in the summer when you've got longer days, maybe go for a walk after and I've heard of people saying, I've got a kettlebell by my desk, and I'll just about 20 minutes after I've finished eating, I'll swing my kettlebell a little bit just to get your body going. And again, that helps to flatten your glucose curve.
God, I love it. So many tips. Thank you for that. I love it. Absolutely love it. And so, as I said before, it's like, you're, part of Odyssey as well, that, you're there, that you will talk clients through this one-to-one, that you're going to be looking at that as well, and they can book you through the system. So that's absolutely brilliant. And if they go onto Odyssey website, they also will see that there's your book there as well. It's absolutely lovely. Now, we're sitting in front of a live audience at the moment. So if there's anybody in the live audience that would like to ask a question, we're going to take those questions now, and then we'll share that a little bit later. We'll add it to the end of the actual clip. Okay, brilliant. So let's go for it. So the question for those who are going to hear this is literally about who's been asked for this individual person in the audience. It's about, about cooking with love and loving thyself, and also about looking at the foods that they've been eating, and also talking about maybe being still curvaceous after making some changes. Now, energetically, I'm going to look at this, and I'm going to give it to you, Ursula, if that's okay. Energetically, as a past life practitioner, what I found is that also that a lot of clients, this doesn't mean this for you particularly, but those who might hear this as well during this, those who retain weight, I know I did that myself as well, was literally about protection, not wanting to be seen, but actually it's the opposite effect it has. There's also about, yes, you were saying about the loving thyself because of how the body feels about it, and holding on to things, the emotions that we hold on to. And what you said about, the intention of cooking. We had someone on recent, Theo, we were talking about mindfulness and what we're eating, and to be present with the food. And I know as a mindfulness practitioner, that's really important, because about the digestive enzymes. Now that's coming from the energetic point of view. I'm going to hand it over to Ursula and see if there's differences or what Ursula has to say with this as well. But I think that's a really great question that you brought up. Thank you for that. So Ursula, how would you address this from your part of what you do?
I think, yeah, thank you for that question. It's really interesting. And I would wholeheartedly think that that's a really beautiful response and a beautiful thought to go down that path. I think that it would make a lot of sense. We were talking about hormones before, and cortisol can really play havoc for women. And it can be a really, really problematic hormone. It's the fight or flight hormone. And it can really, particularly as we get a bit older, it can be one that can really trip us up, because what it essentially does is if it feels that we're constantly in a sort of stressful situation, if we're constantly in a kind of protect and fight or flight mode, then what it does is it knows. So if we go back to our ancestors who needed to run up scale a tree to get away from the saber-toothed tiger, they needed some fast energy quickly. And so when we're in a very stressful situation, and that I think can honestly be as much as just the way that we feel about our body the whole time. If we're constantly sending these messages saying that we don't feel great, or we feel uncomfortable, that is quite stressful on ourselves. And often we are making choices that maybe are a bit diety rather than enjoying ourselves, which then puts us constantly into this fight or flight place. And cortisol, so if cortisol is pulsing through your body, what it does is it holds on to fat. It because what it needs to get away from the saber-toothed tiger is fat, because what happens is you get adrenaline, and adrenaline needs fat to work. So what it does is it just goes, right, we're in a really stressful situation right now. I've got to hold on to as much fat as possible, because this saber-toothed tiger isn't going away. It's here the whole time. So I think you're probably right. I think intuitively you've come with a really nice answer to your own problem, which it may well be that if you take some time with your food, put a lot of love into it. You're really, obviously you're already, as a herbalist, you understand about what you're putting into it. I'm sure you're putting lots of herbs into your food, which is another amazing way of getting all of those polyphenols and loads of incredible nutrients into you. But just taking the time, slowing down, really enjoying things, really savoring things, making something that's really delicious, where you might not eat as much as it because it was really rich, like adding a lot of fat into your diet. Like, fat is fantastic if it's the right kind of fat, if it's the fat that comes from olive oil, from avocados, from good cheeses. It tends to be the ones that are have been not pasteurized, and they're kind of essentially the raw ones with lots of nice bacteria in it for your gut. Those cheeses are the ones that are kind of quite good. You want these fats, you need these fats, nuts, seeds, all these sort of things. They're very calming in the body as well, and they might help your body to turn off the cortisol and bring in the more of the serotonin, the dopamine that will, I think will help. I hope would help. I think it would be really, really fascinating for you to, but I intuitively, I would agree with that, because I always know, and I was talking to a friend about this only today, that whenever I felt a bit uncomfortable in my own body, in my own skin, I tend to then kind of panic a bit, and I go on to, I eat less, and I get into that place of stress. And as soon as I go easy on myself and I go, oh, you know what, I'm going to have the dark chocolate, I'm going to have that one glass of red wine or whatever, I'm going to treat myself to things that feel really nice, I'm going to go and eat out with my friends, that's when I lose weight, always.
I love that. It's similar to myself, actually. I know when I'm really stressful, it's like I store it around exactly where you're saying. I store it around my waist.
Yeah.
So I love that answer. Thank you. Hopefully that's helped the member of audience that we have here, some of that information, and those who are listening to this. So thank you, Ursula, for that. So great question. We have a member of audience here, and the question was about, plant-based, but occasionally eat grass-fed meat, which is absolutely brilliant. So happy meat as much as they can be. And then looking at the lectins in our food, as in tomatoes and a few other foods that might be inflammatory. What is Ursula's view? Oh gosh, I can't even speak English. What is Ursula's thought on that? How it affects the body? Does it affect the body? What is your personal view on that? Thank you, Ursula.
Thank you. A good question again. My understanding of it and my research into it has been that it's a highly personal response. It tends to be at like an autoimmune response. So it's not necessarily. I think that generally people who've got these, people often have this with like the nightshade family, and they're concerned about aubergines and all that kind of stuff. It's the same kind of thing. And it tends to be that you would have, if you had that kind of anti-inflammatory response to it, inflammatory response to it, you would know. And so I think that generally you would, unless you've had this test that said, that you've got an issue or an allergy there, I would just eat the rainbow. I would encourage you to kind of go and eat as much as possible, because these intolerances, they're very obvious. They are on the increase because of the way that we're farming, and the way also bizarrely the way that we're coming into the world now with the rise in cesarean sections and things like that, the way that basically our autoimmune system is not what it was, because when people are, so if I would say to somebody, like if I knew that somebody had had a C-section birth and their mother didn't breastfeed, then I might say, okay, you might have a little bit of a different response, because essentially those two things are very important when you're born as to how your gut biome is set up. So you might that can cause long-term issues for you the whole way down your life. But generally, I've never met anybody who's had really serious issues with it. So I think it's just been a bit of they've demonized it.
I just
It's like
I
gluten intolerance. Most people don't have a gluten intolerance. Um, it's just that the other things that they're putting on it, or it might be that they're eating like a low quality bread, and then it's discovering that they've got an issue with it. And it's not the bread, it's not the wheat really, it's not the gluten. It's because of all the other flavors and colorings and other nonsense that's gone into it. So I think that if you're eating as close to nature, a good variety of stuff, it wouldn't enter into my head to be too concerned about it.
And as you were talking, I was just they came in and I got so excited. I was like, oh, okay. So they agree with what you're saying, Ursula. Okay. I was listening to them and sort of hearing what they are saying. And for those who don't know, it's like working with guides and everybody else on this side. Thank you. But they were saying it's like the fresher the food is, the closer that it has the sunshine. I mean, they're going on about the sunshine now going into the food. When you are eating certain foods, it outbalances everything else. They're saying what is more damaging is the stresses that the human has in trying to move away from certain foods, making life a lot more complicated for themselves. They brought me to an image that this week I had a pear, and I was sitting there and the sun was shining, and I put the pear by the window for a while, and it was organic as well. And they were sort of saying it's like their happiness, and it sounds bizarre, but the happiness of all the light coding that's coming through at the moment on the planet. I'm talking from an energy perspective, so very different in a way. But with the light coding that's coming through on the planet this moment, that's hitting our food, it's more about obtaining that most natural part of the food that you can. And like as you were saying, Ursa, sometimes that there is these fads that we have that hit the headlines about certain foods and stuff. And again, unless your body's prone to certain things and you've had the test done, then continue to eat. If you tune into your body and you feel what your body feels after you've eaten it, and up to 20 minutes at least, then you know what works for your body. So they're sort of saying sometimes you don't even need to have an in-depth hospital test or scientific test. Tune into your own body. And the person I'm talking to in the audience, she's very energetically aware, and I think that might be a good way of looking at it. Thing is, and what they say energetically is about loving ourselves, loving our bodies, being grateful for what we are receiving. I know might some people like go, oh, here we go, but being grateful for what we're receiving, because that cuts out a lot of the issue of us thinking something's bad for ourselves, and that's already set in our chemistry set that we've got going on our body. When we're receiving certain foods, if we're already thinking, oh, this is really a bit naughty, I shouldn't have this or whatever, we're already setting up from the mind. The mind communicates with the body, so it's already creating a disaster. Whereas if we give thanks, like when I'm eating meat, I literally give thanks to that animal that has sacrificed itself just so that I can feel nourished. So absolutely love it. So it's all about energy as well with the food. So I love that. So, and I was going to say, you are the best expert with your body. You're tuning to your body energetically, and you'll know what's the best thing. I love that.
100%. I totally agree.
I
I
love
think
that.
I think we can get ourselves into a sort of a real muddle around our just in our thought processes. And that kind of goes back to the previous question as well. I think, when I meditate twice a day, and at the end of my morning meditation, I always come up with 10 things that I'm thankful for. And, I quite often am very thankful about my body. And and then I sometimes think to myself, was I that thankful to my body? Because at the same time, I was thinking about how my elbow hurts and, blah, 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 blah. And I think that there is a lot of we have to as we know with the law of attraction, you know, if we've got something counterintuitive going on in our head where we're kind of trying to think positively, but in the back of our mind we're actually thinking negatively, it's tripping us up. So we've got to sort of, you know, I always try and think, and that's why I think you've, particularly with food, you've got to be quite effortless about it. It's got to be nourishing and delicious and lovely, but not like take up too much of your time, and you shouldn't become too preoccupied by it, because that's when you start to go, oh, should I have had that chocolate? Or should I? And actually, no, yeah, you had some dark chocolate. It's really good for you. Great. Yes, you had a delicious bit of sourdough bread that is full of gut bacteria food, you know, or whatever it is. It's not tripping yourself up to give those counterintuitive messages that I think is really important.
I absolutely love that. And I know there's somewhere in your book, there's a recipe. I think, hopefully it's in your book, that you did for us on the retreat. I think was it dates or something that you had soaked in dark chocolate or something that you made. And we've like,
I do like a I do like a medjool date with almond butter, and then I cover it in dark chocolate.
oh
That's a good
my
one, that
God,
one.
it's to die for. It's fabulous. And that is such a brilliant treat. So I love that. I love that about you, Ursula, because it's like, oh my God, you don't feel guilty in having the chocolate with the date and everything. It's like, oh, they are together. They come in as one. So I love that. So
And also,
thank
like, one of them is enough. Like,
you. Yeah,
you don't, it's not like, because
trust
I
me.
tend to find that when I was younger, and I definitely was concerned about my weight and stuff, as we often are when we're younger, I used to sort of deny myself stuff. And then I ate around the problem, because actually what I wanted was that chocolate. But instead, what I did was I ate 426 Rivita, which didn't satisfy me at all. Whereas I just should have gone and had that one bit of chocolate.
I
And then
love
it would have been, you know, job done.
I love that. That's brilliant. Thank you. Thank you. Hopefully it answers your question. Great question from the audience member that we're talking about now. We're talking about milks turning from dairy. What do we go to? This individual is looking at about they've changed to oat milk, and then having some grief from their friends about, you know, there's all this going on about oat milk. Is it really good for you? Is it over processed and stuff? So Ursula, you are the wizard in the kitchen with the food and everything else. Not that I'm placing you in the kitchen, but you are the expert on this. I am not. What are your thoughts on this process of switching over from dairy and using alternative milks?
Well, there is some truth in that. I mean, essentially, I would say that with all these things, with anything, the definition of an ultra processed food is when basically it doesn't really look like how it would have originally started. So you could argue that an oat flake doesn't look very much like oat milk at all. It looks pretty different. So therefore, you could say that it's an ultra processed food. And I would say that there are, with all of these things, you kind of need to look at the company. So somewhere like Oatly, which is, you know, very commonly used, I think is reasonably processed, whereas someone like Plenish, which unfortunately is more expensive, is less. You know, it's always about looking at the ingredients, looking at what the extra bits are. You know, it's like if you look at a loaf of bread in the supermarket, what it should say flour, water, and maybe salt, probably salt. But unfortunately, it says a million other things. So the clue is there on the packaging. I mean, I would say that it's not a super, if I was going to classify it in terms of high ultra processed food, I wouldn't say that it's that bad, because there isn't that much. I mean, I've made oat milk and I've made almond milk, and actually it's very simple. And if you have a good quality blender, which I love having one in I mean, I'm very lucky I have a Vitamix, but even so, you can make really, really good plant-based milks very cheaply and really easily. You need very few things to make it happen. And I must say, actually, almond milk, when you make it yourself, is possibly the most delicious thing ever. It's amazing. It's so sweet and it's delicious in coffee and tea or whatever. It's gorgeous. And really all you need is a good quality blender and what they call a nut bag or some muslin, and then you can make it yourself. It's really not hard. So if you want to go the whole hog, then 100% try and make it, and I'm very happy to share how you do that. But if not, it's just like everything. Look at the packaging, see how many extra ingredients there are in it. But also be slightly heartened by the fact that it's not that hard to take an almond and make it into milk. You soak the almond, you blend it, you get rid of the pulp. That's about it. So however they're doing it, the only thing that they would be doing is probably adding a bit of preservatives into it to give it longer shelf life. And that's probably the most worrying thing. But if you've got the time and the energy to make it, it's very simple to do.
So I have a question. If we look at then the alternatives, because I can't have dairy just because I'm asthmatic and the mucus which forms from that. So, you know, I've sometimes I've gone in and I bought the oat milk, and then I hear this about the glucose and then how that affects your body afterwards. You shouldn't be having oat. And then I changed to almond, and then I have almond for a while, and then I hear other information, and then I change again to soy, and then you can't have soy because it does this. So I'm confused. So as a consumer, I'm very confused. So what would you suggest out of, because to be honest, I'm not the queen in the kitchen. I can't do certain things, or I choose not to. Sorry, I'm a bit lazy. I must admit. That's why, Ursula, I have you on the retreats, darling, because I love your food so much. Sorry. So for me, if I was going to purchase, I'm lazy. If I was going to purchase some alternative milk to dairy, what would you suggest possibly could be the better one then? Is there a selection, different types?
I like the brand Plenish. I think they're pretty good. And they also do a lot of different milks. So they do hazelnut and they do macadamia and they do, lots of other things. In terms of what you're talking about, the kind of the carbohydrate thing and the glucose spike, yes, with an oat milk, you're going to get more of that because it is a bit more carbohydrate heavy, whereas a nut milk is going to be much more protein heavy. And also because you've got like macadamias and almonds and cashews make really delicious vegan cheeses because they've got a really high fat content. So that's why they work so well as alternative milks. And really, it really is as simple as you get some nuts, you leave them in some water, probably overnight. You stick them in a blender with you rinse them. You stick them in the blender with some more water, ideally purified water, and then you sieve it. And you get it, or you put it through a nut bag. It's no more complicated than that. It just requires a bit of kit.
My bad.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the almond milk, it's insanely good. It's and also the leftover bits you get from it, like you get like the pulp of it. I can send you recipes where you can make them into like crackers for cheese, so nothing goes to waste. So
Wow, who knew that could turn into crackers? What I need during my life. My God,
or you
seriously.
can use it as part of, stick it in your compost, and that's a really nice nutrient to then put back into the garden. So nothing ever needs to be wasted. But yeah, I think Plenish is probably better. I could do some more research into that, but like anything that becomes sort of big business tends to then, unfortunately, the quality tends to go. So artisan, I think Plenish is the most kind of artisan, and unfortunately therefore it is a bit more expensive, but to be fair to them, nuts are expensive. They
I
are.
love that. Thank you so much. So the audience member, I'm just going to check back with you. Does that help? And we're looking at the alchemy of food and the chemistry set that's on our plate. So we're looking at, is it better to separate groups of foods, or is it better to combine them together, or is there no such thing that there is better? It's just about you individually. What is your suggestion, Ursula?
Okay, so great question. I would say there have been over the years a lot of very faddy diets. There's been things like the Atkins diet, when we've eliminated stuff, we've eliminated carbohydrates and very fat heavy. There's been ones where it's been where you have carbohydrate in one meal and then protein in the next meal and all that kind of stuff. I don't really follow that. But I do think, because I think that anything that's restrictive is sort of a bad idea. Anything that's sort of saying, don't do this and do this is a bit it's a bit constrictive for people. So I think, and restrictive. So I think, but there is some good science that indicates that the order in which we eat food can have an impact on how well we digest things. So going back to kind of what I was talking about with the biohacking, having that plate of greens to start off is a really good idea. starting your day with savory food rather than sweet food is a really good idea. So, and when I say savory, that also means, not having too much carbohydrates. So that would be because essentially, unfortunately, your carbohydrates, as I said before, turn into sugar in your system. So if you're going to have toast, you're slathering it with avocado, or you're making a tofu scramble. And this is what things I do. Obviously, it could be an egg scramble, or it could be some boiled eggs and some avocado, and making sure that you've got a good balance of fat and protein. And ideally, I mean, in a perfect world, you might want to eat your carbohydrates last, just because your body helps. It's kind of like that's going to slow everything down, basically. And so if you're already digesting some food, and you're going through your proteins, and your greens, they're all going along in a nice, calm, level. Not your glucose spike is not going like that. But if you added the carbohydrate in early doors, you're already going up. So it's better to have that spike later when you've already got all that other food in your digestive tract, which has already got it calm and slower. So I can definitely see the benefits in, as I say, starting off a meal. And this is what I do on retreats a lot. I will give everyone like a salad. Raw foods are quite good at the beginning of a meal. I'll give them lots of veggies. It might be a soup or whatever. And then I'll give some protein, and then I might end with something carbohydrate, and definitely sort of end with something sweeter when your digestion has got going a bit more. And that can be really helpful. I mean, obviously, when people have had illnesses, or there are other intolerances that are playing a part in how your digestive system is working, then that needs to be considered. But what I would say is that unfortunately, I mean, that's a general, quite a good idea, what I just articulated, just having the greens first, then the proteins, then the carbohydrates. But it is unfortunately different for everybody. We're not the same. I'm not the same biology. If I had a twin sister, we might be quite similar, but even then there'd be some differences and discrepancies. So you do have to intuitively understand what's going on in your body, and kind of what we've been talking about before, understanding when something you're reacting with it badly, or it not sitting correctly. We've all had those moments. I know one of the reasons why I became a vegan was because I knew that cream and dairy just didn't work for me. It sat really heavily. I had a stomach ache. It just felt wrong. Um, and I know now, if I overdo it on a bit of sugar, then I often get a bit of stomach ache. So you listen to those cues in your body, because they are there. But those, so I'd say yes and no is the answer to that question, because we do have to tune into our individual systems. But I do think that the biohacking also can come in the form of, you can do so much work on working on your gut biome, and increasing your gut biome, and increasing the variety of your gut biome. That means that things that you might not have been able to tolerate before, you can. And if you had got a gluten intolerance, or you had got a bit of a dairy intolerance, that actually by fueling your digestive system with putting in lots and lots of probiotics and prebiotics. So prebiotics are the foods that feed your gut biome. So that's things like garlics, leeks, onions, all those sort of things. And then the prebiotics and the probiotics. So basically, that could be fermented foods, kefir, water kefir, kombucha, all those kind of things. And just by eating those and adding those into your diet, you can completely revolutionize how you can tolerate food.
Well, I love that. Thank you so much, Ursula. So, Ursula, come on. Do you want to now do the question and then answer it? Do you want me to?
I mean, I can do, yeah.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So the question was all about detoxification, essentially, and whether there are supplements and things like detox teas that we can have that will help to contribute to aid in that detoxification process, and other things like that. I think that's about covers it, right? And my answer to that would be, I have a lot of scientists in my family. And I'm quite different from them. I am obviously I'm much more of an empath, and I really fervently believe in all the work we're doing here. I'm also my sister, who is a doctor, I know that she had 7 hours in 7 years of training. She had 7 hours of nutritional training. So unfortunately, doctors, and this is not disrespectful to doctors at all. They just don't really know so much. But the one thing that my doctors, my scientist brother-in-law always talks about is the fact that your liver is your detoxification organ, and it does a very, very good job. And there are things that can definitely, I think, help. So from a herbal perspective, things like milk thistle, I know I mean, any time I've thought, oh, I might have a couple of glasses of wine last night, I know I have some milk thistle. It definitely helps. It definitely helps to ease your detoxification process. But your liver is doing an amazing job, and it's it's regenerating the whole time. It's your one organ that it rejuvenates as we carry on in our lives. So it's we don't I wouldn't I worry about putting too much emphasis on detoxification and on any kind of like very hardcore juicing regime or any kind of like really hard regime that's basically quite hard to sort of maintain and can give kind of like false results that are quite hard to sort of maintain. Um, but I do fervently believe, and I'm sure you do as a herbalist, about all the good stuff that comes from eating consuming all those different herbs in whatever way, where it be slippery elm, which is a great diet. It's great if you've got acid reflux. It's a great thing that you can take that kind of lines the inside of your esophageal tract, making that much more comfortable. And as I say, milk thistle is an absolute corker. But all of the herbs they're incredible medicine box. Essentially, they're this incredible toolbox that we've had for millennia. Way before we discovered that willow you could get aspirin out of a willow tree. It's all these things have been there to help us, and so I think we need to sort of tune into all of that stuff. And also have respect for our body to know that it knows what it's doing. And not worry. I think, because I do think that a lot of these things, like, I mean, most of my research and my teaching has indicated to me that stuff like we don't really need to supplement that much. And I'm concerned that there is some supplementation that can be really helpful. And obviously, if you've got a health condition, it can be super helpful. But generally, it's a billion-pound company that is essentially could be slightly milking us, and I worry a little bit about those kind of things like teas. I'm sure they could be great, but they don't necessarily need to be detox teas. Do you know what I mean? Like they could just be a delicious rooibos tea, or you could get a teaspoon of fennel and you put some hot water on it, and maybe you add a teaspoon of honey or whatever. That's great. That's just as good. So I think just access nature's medicine box and don't worry necessarily about anything that's kind of prescribed as being detoxifying.
Do you know what, Ursula? I absolutely love it. It's what's amazing me is that it's funny that we've come with real turnaround. It's like a real cycle, real birthing in the sense this moment in time. But what we would have used going back in the day, when we weren't so industrialized. Now we're starting to turn around and look at that again now, which is absolutely amazing. It's absolutely beautiful how we're turning back to nature as our medicine box, as you just so put it. It's so true. And I think, from an energy point of view, teaching about energy is really good to go in that biohacking, what they're talking about, the hacking into our energy stream is brilliant by us feeling into what feels right for our own individual bodies, because we're all so unique and so different. We have, we can take information from here and there, but as you so nicely put it earlier, is that literally, we are this chemistry set and we have to look at ourselves individually, which is absolutely brilliant. And I totally agree with you. Thank you so much for the audience members that have been here this evening. It's been absolute divine you know, the questions we've been asked, and even the energy of those who are in the audience listening to us and those who are going to hear this when this goes out live is absolutely amazing. And thank you so much, Ursula, for your time. If anyone's interested, we have Ursula will be joining us at Odyssey. We'll be doing more talks about how we can help individuals changing, shifting things around for them bodily wise, and going down that avenue and looking at the energy perspective as well. If anyone's interested, they can reach out to Ursula through Odyssey and you can connect with her there.